overhyping a movie sets you up for disappointment, especially when it comes to horror. I can't tell you how many times people told me The Shining is the scariest thing ever, only for me to be disappointed and bored. The same happened with Us. Now, I'm not knocking Jordan Peele here. Us was a great experience from start to finish, but it didn't leave me reeling the way Get Out did, you know? It did have its moments, like the whole Ophelia call the police sequence was amazing. The entire cinema was laughing the moment F the police started, and that's awesome. I love that scene. There are plenty of moments like that in the movie, but that's just it. They're just moments, you know? The real problem is that I was subconsciously comparing it to Get Out, instead of letting it stand on its own merits. And it's not just me. Before Get Out, everybody knew Jordan Peele as the comedian who did skits with Keegan-Michael Key. And then, out of nowhere, Peele writes and directs Get Out. So naturally, people were hyped that Us would be leagues above Get Out, but it's not. It's a completely different experience, and that's fine. At least Peele wasn't trying to sucker punch you with a bad twist ending, right? Not like M. Night Shyamalan did with Glass. Oh, how far the mighty fall. Ever since The Village and The Last Airbender, people began losing faith in him, until he wrote and directed Split. Now, Split was pretty epic.
I swear I was on a bus. I don't remember anything after that.
No one expected anything from it. So when all of us found out it was set in the Unbreakable universe, we were blown away. Shyamalan had another chance at greatness here. He could create a trilogy of superhero movies with supernatural elements. But then came Glass. The marketing promised fans an epic showdown between David Dunn and the Beast. The hype was unreal. But then came the movie and it bombed. Neither the critics nor audiences appreciate constant exposition dumps, the unnecessary twists, and the disappointing ending. What could have been a major comeback for the once revered director turned out to be a dud the moment it stepped through the door. I'm not saying that Glass was unwatchable. I'm just saying it could have been a lot more. Just like Land of the Dead. Remember, back in the early 2000s, zombie horror movies were finally making a comeback. 28 Days Later, the Dawn of the Dead remake, Shaun of the Dead, they were all awesome zombie experiences. But then came the announcement that Night of the Living was getting another installment. And it was coming from the legendary George A. Romero, the man responsible for popularizing the zombie genre in the 60s and 70s. So the hype was unreal. Zombies that can think, learn, and strategize, you don't see that every day. But when Land of the Dead came out, it didn't win me over. Again, not that it was bad, it was alright. It's just that the hype was too much for the movie to overcome. It was heartbreaking to see Romero's work underperform at the box office. That's the problem with a majority of the movies in this video. They're not that bad. They're just victims of their own hype. Like 2017's Veronica. Remember how folks all over social media were like, "This is the scariest thing ever." I've had friends tell me that they couldn't sleep after watching it, and I've come across articles that said the same thing. And I thought, well, now I have to watch it. But when I watched it, I made it all the way to the end without feeling scared out of my mind. Don't get me wrong, it's a good horror movie, but it's not pause the moment because I'm terrified scary. Again, it's the hype that ruined it for me, but at least it wasn't as bad as Paranormal Activity. Now, let me clarify something. Paranormal Activity works as a slow burn horror for a lot of people, and that's great. But people were comparing it to the Blair Witch Project. So obviously I was intrigued. Could it be that good? But it just wasn't. The pacing was glacial. The scares were few and far between, and the ending was the only scary bit I can remember. Oh, and the part where she watches him sleep all night. That was creepy. But yeah, other than that, not worth the hype surrounding it. On the flip side, slow burn horrors aren't the only ones that fail to match expectations. Take for example, Army of the Dead. Zack Snyder's movies are a love it or hate it type deal. Remember Dawn of the Dead all the way back in 2004? It's one of the best horror remakes I've ever seen to this day. So when he announced that he's making another zombie movie, I was hyped, no questions asked. But then a year before the movie even hit Netflix, they'd already greenlit a prequel and an anime spin-off. Uh-oh. The studio was already thinking that a new franchise was on its way. But when the movie dropped on Netflix, most folks were let down. The subplots were half-baked, none of them paid off, and the runtime was way too long. Snyder could have easily shaved 20 minutes off the runtime if the screenplay was a little tighter. But hey, who am I to judge? I watched The Village thinking it was going to be a groundbreaking horror film. But the only thing it broke was my brain with its god-awful twist. And why'd I think The Village would be groundbreaking? Well, Shyamalan had already released Unbreakable, The Sixth Sense, and Signs, so you can't really blame me for having faith in the guy. I mean, he wouldn't pull the rug out from under me near the end, right? He did. Even though he had a great thing going with a period setting, unsettling atmosphere, and A-list talent. One twist completely ruined it for me. Especially since it was hyped as being the most unexpected horror movie you'll see. Yeah, definitely was unexpected. But hey, sometimes you just can't meet everyone's expectations. People can and do expect perfection from filmmakers. Like when Freddy vs. Jason was announced. Now, how could it match anyone's expectations? The Springwood slasher going toe-to-toe with the hockey mask, an unstoppable force meets an immovable object? You'd think the fight would go on to eternity, right? Wrong. It was an hour and a half of uninspired dialogue and murder only to find out that no one won. Jason's alive and Freddy is too because he winks at the audience. You know, if I make a movie about two unbelievably powerful villains, I'll make sure one of them loses the war. That's just more decisive and leaves room for a sequel too. It Chapter 2 was a victim of expectations too. The child actors from the first movie received so much acclaim that they were brought back for the sequel. You know, as opposed to sticking true to the source material. Don't get me wrong, I love Sophia Lillis, Finn Wolfhard, and the other kids. But Chapter 2 was about the adult versions, and if they didn't incorporate the kids in their flashbacks, which weren't needed by the way, then the movie could have shaved 30 to 40 minutes off its runtime. That's shocking! And when Chapter 2 didn't match the heights of the original, it wasn't a big surprise. A lot like Halloween Ends. Where do I even start with this one? You've probably read and watched all the reviews you'll ever need, but I will say one thing. As a fan of the Halloween series and its iconic villain, I was expecting more polish from the filmmakers. It's a 45-year-old franchise and it deserved a powerful send-off for every character. Especially if Laurie and Myers are having a final face-off. Their story should have had more finesse to it, higher stakes, better writing, and yet after all the hype, the marketing, the promise of an end to Laurie and Mike's story, I just expected more, you know? And that's about it. I'll see you in the next video.